In a lavish, moonlit bedroom, soft moans and sighs signal someone stirring from sleep. A black-haired man leans intimately over a blushing blonde woman, gently licking a tear from her cheek. The flushed blonde woman breathes his name in a soft, captivated whisper, Évariste. In a flash, Évariste sinks his fangs into her neck, causing her eyes to widen with shock. She gasps, a pained yet captivated expression on her face as he holds her close. A memory reveals Évariste Lojeux, master of the vampire castle, his red eyes glowing and lips stained with blood. Lost in his embrace, the blonde woman feels as if she's blissfully drowning in an illusion of love. The beautiful dream shatters, replaced by the cold reality that she is nothing more than a sacrifice. The story rewinds to the inner courtyard of Viscount Xenefar's estate. There, the eldest daughter, a sickly-looking blonde woman named Liddy, sips her tea. As Liddy sits alone in a garden gazebo, another young woman with blonde hair approaches her from behind. The second daughter, Michelle, arrives, greeting her big sister with a bright smile. Liddy thinks to herself that she was just starting to feel a little better today. Michelle closes her eyes and lets out a quiet, impatient sigh. She begins to criticize her sister's appearance, noting that her skin and hair are a mess from her illness. Liddy's expression saddens as she's reminded of the physical toll her sickness has taken. Michelle sneers, saying if it were her, she'd be too ashamed to leave her room with such an ugly body. Liddy recalls the past year spent suffering from an unexplained illness, leaving her bedridden with dizziness, headaches, and fatigue. Her thoughts drift to her forced leave from the academy and how much she misses Prince Callian, whom she loves. But her expression hardens with resolve. She refuses to give up and still wants to find a cure to return to school. Liddy resolves to maintain her strength, hoping a cure will one day be found. Michelle scoffs, telling her it would be smarter to stay locked in her room since even doctors have given up. Liddy is left speechless by her sister's cruelty. She remembers a time when Michelle was an adorable little girl in a yellow dress. A memory of her sister's sweet, innocent, and joyful smile flashes through her mind. But those days are gone, and now it feels like Michelle hates her. Liddy desperately asks if she did something wrong, offering to apologize to fix things between them. Turning away, she quietly tells Michelle that she truly wants to make up with her. Michelle's face twists into a cruel smirk as she confesses she's hated Liddy since they were children. She reveals her friendly little sister persona was all an act, shattering Liddy's perception of their relationship. Liddy stares in wide-eyed disbelief, unable to comprehend her sister's confession. Michelle begins her explanation, recalling how even their parents always favored Liddy. A vision of a beautiful, healthy Liddy in a flowing blue dress appears. Liddy is shown smiling sweetly at a handsome, brown-haired man. Michelle bitterly explains that she was in love with him first, but he became obsessed with Liddy. The brown-haired man looks at Liddy with complete adoration, confirming Michelle's painful memory. A vicious grin spreads across Michelle's face, a hint of a fang showing as a red jewel gleams on her necklace. That's not true, Liddy protests, her world crumbling around her. Michelle simply turns away with a smug, dismissive look. Just you wait, Michelle warns, as Liddy trembles in fear and a mysterious thought calls her a pitiful woman. At that moment, the brown-haired man from their past arrives at the estate, wondering where she is after coming to visit. He stops short, surprised to see the two sisters sitting together in the garden. Liddy looks at Michelle, still processing the shocking confession. Without warning, Michelle suddenly tears her hair ribbon and rips the front of her own dress. Kya! Michelle screams as she throws herself onto the ground, while Liddy watches in stunned silence. The brown-haired man's face twists in alarm as he witnesses the scene and rushes forward from the manor. He runs frantically toward the gazebo, shouting, "What happened?" A blonde-haired woman in a pink dress leans against Lord Clyde, calling out his name in distress. Crying, she desperately begs for help, her plea trailing off as she mentions her big sister. Leon looks on with pity, thinking to himself, "Poor Michelle." From a distance, Liddy watches as Leon kneels to comfort the distraught Michelle in the garden. With a stern gaze fixed on Liddy, Leon demands an explanation for the scene unfolding before him. A sly smile crosses Michelle's face as Liddy looks on in absolute horror, the moment hanging in the air. As an illusion of shattered glass floats around her, Liddy wonders in confusion what is happening. The scene is set as Liddy stands on a set of steps, observing the tense moment between Leon and a weeping Michelle. Crying Michelle falsely claims Liddy yelled at her to stop seducing him, suggesting her sister's outburst was due to jealousy over a pendant. As Liddy looks on in disbelief, Leon's expression hardens with fury, believing that Liddy attacked Michelle out of jealousy. A single tear falls as Liddy questions the accusation. Unable to believe she's being called an attacker, Liddy cries that it's impossible and tries to defend herself, but Leon harshly cuts off her denial, refusing to hear any excuses. Leon reflects that her appearance has been unbearable since her illness, concluding that continuing their relationship out of pity was a mistake. Taking Michelle's hand, Leon begins a formal declaration about their future. His face contorted in anger, he continues his pronouncement with grim finality. He declares their engagement annulled, leaving Liddy utterly devastated as the words sink in. As her world shatters, she watches them leave, desperately thinking that she never attacked Michelle. Trembling, she reaches out and begs him to wait, pleading for a chance to clear the misunderstanding. She cries out in anguish, clutching her shawl as she hopelessly pleads. With tears streaming down her face, she can only manage one last, whispered plea. Memory surfaces of a younger Leon kissing her forehead, a red rose in his hand. In the memory, he smiles warmly, promising that they would always be together. The memory shatters, reflecting her current pain, her isolation, and the betrayal by Leon and Michelle. Overwhelmed by heartbreak, Liddy collapses to her knees, crying uncontrollably. As Leon walks away with Michelle, Liddy is left utterly alone and abandoned on the ground. Michelle glances back, a look of pure triumphant malice on her face. Liddy reflects that her strange illness was already considered a disgrace to the Zixnafar family. Her father coldly calls her annulment a disappointment and her alleged attack unforgivable, noting that at least Lord Clyde now favors Michelle. She remembers desperately trying to explain everything to her parents, but they refused to believe a single word she said. She realizes with pain that while she always felt unwanted, she never imagined her own parents wouldn't even trust her. A few days later, the annulment of the engagement is officially finalized, but her ordeal was far from over. As she recalls that what happened next was even worse, Liddy sits quietly in her bed, trying to find solace in a book. Click. The sound of her door opening makes her look up with a start. Her family enters, and as Liddy asks what is happening, her father holds up a document, ominously declaring that her future has been decided. He informs her that starting tomorrow, she is being sent to the Vampire Duke, leaving her utterly speechless. Liddy, still in shock, can't process her mother's question about what is happening. The woman with silvery hair continues, her expression serious as she mentions the Lord of the Vampire Castle. Liddy recalls the legend. The great sorcerer who protected the kingdom became an immortal vampire as a consequence. A chilling image of the cloaked figure's shadowed face and glowing eyes flashes in her mind. Commonly known as the Vampire Duke, he single-handedly repelled an invasion of monsters 100 years ago. Within 2 weeks, his immense power wiped out all the invaders in a storm of magic. Thanks to his efforts, the kingdom emerged victorious from the war. It was a truly historic event, forever changing the course of the kingdom. To protect the royal family and the nobility from the consequences of the war, a young sorcerer named Évariste Lojou took all the deadly curses upon himself. Liddy recalls reading of his deeds in history books and hearing his name whispered in high society, a well-known hero. Her mother scoffs, asking how she can call him great when he's just a cruel monster who feasts on the blood of beautiful women. She dismisses him as an evil villain seeking favor, claiming nothing good came from his involvement in the war. Liddy is left completely confused by her mother's contradictory and hateful description. Liddy reads from a book, noting that papers mentioned the royal family requesting participation in the war. A worried blonde man reveals that as proof of this, they are being blackmailed indefinitely. To repay the debt from the war, he continues, they are forced to offer sacrifices. Liddy looks on in horror as a cloaked figure stands before a fiery ritual circle, questioning the meaning of sacrifices. A woman holding an ornate fan remains silent as the explanation continues. A pact made with the Vampire Duke forces nobles to offer their daughters as sacrifices every 10 years. Liddy trembles, realizing the horrifying truth of their family's obligation. The blonde man coldly informs a shocked Liddy that she has been chosen as the next sacrifice. Michelle appears with a cruel smile, explaining that while the second daughter is traditional, Liddy was chosen because she's worthless now. She adds that the noble assembly agreed unanimously, as Lai's virginity is all that matters, not her illness. Mocking Liddy, Michelle says they'll have to make do with her, even though the Duke prefers beautiful women. In her bed, Liddy desperately asks her family about her promise to return to the academy. Her father scoffs at the idea, informing her he has already submitted her withdrawal notice. He callously asks why he'd pay for a useless daughter whose engagement was broken, leaving Liddy to whisper a defeated no. Michelle daydreams of her own perfect wedding, telling Liddy to throw away any lingering attachments. With a final, chilling smile, Michelle bids her sister goodbye. Liddy sits stunned on her bed as Michelle's last word echoes in her mind. Forever. A carriage rumbles along the dark mountain path, leading to the vampire castle. In the carriage, Liddy stares ahead grimly, unable to imagine the horrible fate that awaits her. Stealing her resolve, she decides being a sacrifice to the vampire duke might be a better fate than being tormented by her family. The coachman announces their arrival. Stepping out of the carriage, Liddy looks up with a mix of awe and trepidation. She gazes at the imposing vampire castle under a full moon as a giant bat with glowing red eyes swoops down. Whoosh! In a flash of magical energy, the bat transforms into a young woman in a maid's uniform. Liddy gasps in shock as the blue-haired maid stands before her, realizing the bat turned into a girl. Stunned by the display of advanced magic, Liddy stares as the maid calmly welcomes her. The blue-haired maid introduces herself as Mia, a servant of Duke Évariste Lojeu. Liddy startles at the mention of the Duke's name. Composing herself, Liddy nervously thanks Mia and accepts her greeting as they stand together outside the castle. As they walk, Liddy asks Mia a question. Mia turns, asking what she would like to know. Liddy asks Mia if she can use transformation magic. Mia reveals that the bat form Liddy saw is actually her true form. She explains she was originally just a bat, until her master used magic to allow her to become human. Liddy is visibly shaken by the incredible power this implies. An image of various humans and animals wrapped in magical energy symbolizes the Duke's transformative powers. Liddy reflects that such powerful magic is beyond even the royal family's mages, leaving her in disbelief. She realizes that if it's true, it would explain why the kingdom has obeyed the pact for 30 years. Mia gazes at Liddy for a moment before turning away. Looking toward the castle under the full moon, Mia tells Liddy it's time to go, as the master is waiting. Liddy agrees, and the two walk across a bridge toward the towering castle. They enter the vast, opulent main hall of the castle. Mia announces their presence as they stand at the entrance to a lavishly decorated room. Liddy sees a black-haired man, Évariste, sitting pensively on a blue sofa. She observes his impossibly white skin as a small bat rests on his shoulder. Another bat swoops in and transforms into a blue-haired man, who addresses Lady Liddy. Startled, Liddy turns as the man introduces himself as her attendant, Roa. Liddy manages a small smile and greets Roa. A tear escapes her eye as she realizes Roa, like Mia, must also have a true form as a bat. Roa stands before a grand window, addressing his master. Roa announces to his master, Évariste, that Lady Liddy has arrived. Évariste sits quietly on a sofa, his head bowed in contemplation. Looking up with glowing red eyes, Évariste says her name aloud. Liddy? His feet stride across the ornate floor, approaching her. Évariste gently cups Liddy's face, asking her to trust him and surrender herself to him. With tears of relief in her eyes, Liddy closes them and whispers, "Okay." He pulls her into an embrace on the sofa, leaning into her neck. With a glint in his red eyes and fangs bared, Évariste prepares to bite. As he drinks her blood, he notes its exquisite quality and confirms his suspicions about her illness. Liddy's eyes widen in surprise as she realizes she doesn't feel any pain at all. She lets out an involuntary gasp, and Évariste pulls back, his own eyes wide with shock. Blushing, Liddy wonders if the sound she made was her own. As Évariste asks if it hurt, she flusteredly insists it didn't hurt at all, trying to find the right words to explain. With a deep blush, she admits that she simply couldn't stop the sound from escaping. Évariste looks on, listening intently to her explanation. A faint blush dusts his cheeks as he tells her there's no need to apologize. When Liddy offers to continue, Évariste decides against it, saying he will wait instead. He suggests they resume tomorrow, noting she must be tired from her long journey. Liddy looks puzzled, admitting that for some reason, she doesn't feel tired at all. Évariste considers her words and replies with a simple, "I see." A thoughtful smile plays on his lips as he muses that her condition might really be what he suspected. Liddy agrees to his offer to wait, but suggests they change locations first. In response, Évariste extends his hand to her. Confused, she hesitantly places her hand in his. Without another word, he sweeps her up into his arms. A flash of magical energy erupts from the spot where they were just sitting. In an instant, they reappear inside a grand bedroom, standing beside a large canopy bed. Liddy stares in shock, asking if he just used teleportation magic. Everest apologizes for startling her, explaining that he was concerned about her earlier outburst. As he gently lays her on the bed, she's moved by his unexpected consideration for her. He leans over her, pinning her to the mattress as she gasps. Liddy arches her back, completely lost in the moment. Everest continues to drink her blood as she lies among the covers. Overwhelmed by the powerful new sensation, Liddy finds herself clinging tightly to him. Outside, the vampire castle stands silent beneath the light of the full moon. Sometime later, Everest walks through a grand doorway, announcing his return to Liddy. Now looking vibrant and healthy, Liddy smiles brightly and welcomes Lord Everest home. Everest gazes at her, his expression soft and pleased. Liddy studies him with concern, thinking he looks pale and wondering if he's unwell. Her eyes fall upon his hand, noticing it's stained with fresh blood. Startled, she calls his name and points out that his hand is injured. Everest glances down at his hand, remarking calmly that the wound is still there. He shows her the deep, bloody gashes on his hand, explaining that it's always like this. Liddy looks at the gruesome wound with horror, whispering that it's awful. She realizes that for a wound to remain unhealed on a vampire, it must be incredibly severe. Everest stands before her, looking stoic as red petals float around him. Clutching her chest, Liddy wonders how much pain he must have endured if this happens all the time. She looks up at him, her eyes filled with a newfound empathy and worry. Everest meets her gaze with a faint, knowing smile. In a sunlit memory, a young, blonde-haired Liddy looks on with gentle concern. In the flashback, she encourages someone to recover quickly, offering to give as much as they need. She presses a man's hand to her neck as he, Everest, tells her not to hold back. As he brings her scratched hand to his lips, he thanks her, questioning if she is still willing. The blonde Liddy looks back, her expression a mixture of surprise and resolve. The scene shifts to the present, where Everest sits alone in a dark, opulent room, lost in thought. He stirs from his reverie, his red eyes opening as he calls out Liddy's name. Everest rises to his feet, surrounded by ethereal, glowing blue flowers. A startled Liddy, now with silvery blonde hair and wearing a blue dress, appears in the room. She trembles, recalling rumors that he loves the blood of beautiful women and worrying she won't be enough for him. Everest's gaze darkens as he reflects on the curse of his existence, wishing he were weaker than he is now. Liddy nervously curtsies, offering a timid greeting to the vampire duke. Everest gazes at her impassively from his seat on the grand sofa. His eyes suddenly widen with a flicker of shocked recognition. In an instant, he is before her, gently touching her face as he realizes who she is. Stunned by his touch, Liddy sees the discolored patches of her illness on her skin and questions what is happening. Everest stares at her intently, his expression unreadable as he examines her face. Flustered and blushing, Liddy wonders why he is acting so strangely all of a sudden. She flinches slightly, and he immediately apologizes for his forwardness. Standing before a grand window, he formally introduces himself as Everest Loge. In the drawing room, Everest invites Liddy to sit, though she remains standing hesitantly. Liddy studies him, thinking that although his face looks pale, he doesn't seem monstrous. She finally accepts his offer and sits beside him on the sofa. Everest tells her to feel at home and requests that she call him by his first name. After a moment's hesitation, she addresses him as Everest, and he formally welcomes her. Roa, the blue-haired attendant, serves tea, which Liddy gratefully accepts. Everest politely asks his servants, Roa and Mia, to leave them alone for a moment. The two blue-haired servants stand ready to obey their master's command. Everest turns to Roa, waiting for him to speak. Roa urges his master not to show mercy to the sacrifice and to take the blood he needs. Everest rebukes Roa, but Mia interjects, scolding him for releasing sacrifices and worsening his own health. With a flash of authority, Everest sternly orders them to stop, declaring he will handle it. Liddy watches the tense exchange, completely bewildered. Everest silences his attendants with a final command for them to leave. Roa and Mia bow in acceptance of his order and begin to exit the room. Large doors close, leaving Liddy alone with the Duke. Liddy cautiously asks Evariste about his servant's claims that he releases sacrifices without taking their blood. She leans forward slightly, asking if he would be willing to tell her more. Evariste turns away, dismissing her question and insisting it's not a big deal. Liddy silently recalls the history of the sacrificial brides offered by noble families as a sign of respect. The narration explains that though daughters were offered, many arrived terrified and were quickly released, despite Évariste's own need. Évariste sips his drink, his expression somber. He explains that his servants were simply worried, but he never intended to take blood by force, and offers her freedom. Liddy looks at him, softly speaking his name as she processes his words. She thinks to herself that she cannot believe this kind man is the monster from the rumors. Despite his sickly complexion, she realizes he is a man of honor who never took advantage of those sent to him. With newfound resolve, Liddy clenches her fists in her lap. She looks directly at him, her gaze steady, as she announces that she is prepared. Évariste looks at her, taken aback by the conviction in her voice. Liddy explains her unknown disease prevents her from fulfilling her noble duties, but she traveled for days, hoping she could be of help to him. Liddy looks at Évariste with resolve and asks him to accept her blood. Touched by her offer, Évariste quietly says her name. With a tear running down her face, Liddy asks if he is dissatisfied with her because of her ugly illness. Évariste gently lifts her chin, his expression soft as he begins to speak. He tells her that she is very beautiful, leaving her wide-eyed with shock. Thinking that he is a truly kind person, Liddy looks at him with newfound warmth. Blushing slightly, she tells him that if he truly thinks so, then he must accept her offer. With sad resolve, Liddy explains that she has no home to return to and begs to fulfill her duty as a sacrifice. Évariste finally agrees, promising to take only a little of her blood. Liddy beams with pure joy, blushing as she is rendered speechless by his acceptance. Confused by his gratitude, she asks why he is thanking her, but he insists he should be the one to thank her. His smile is gentle as he leans toward her. Surrounded by a vision of glowing yellow flowers, he gazes at her with a soft expression. He gently cups her neck, swearing he will only take enough blood to ensure her life is not endangered. Looking into her eyes, he asks her to trust him and allow herself to surrender. Overcome with emotion, Liddy covers her tear-streaked face and whispers, "Okay." A sound of pleasure escapes her as Évariste feeds from her neck, and she notes that her voice still slips out. She closes her eyes, wondering why this keeps happening, even though he has been taking her blood every day for a week. She lets out a soft moan, her body reacting instinctively. Lying on the bed, a flushed Liddy covers her mouth, embarrassed by her reaction. Évariste pulls away, running a hand through his hair with a deep sigh. He confirms that he has, adding that he feels much better because of her. He gently touches her cheek, turning the question back on her and asking how she is feeling. Sitting beside him in bed, Liddy happily reports that she felt well enough to spend the entire day reading in the library. Évariste's expression turns serious as he tells her that he is now sure of something. He reveals his diagnosis. The illness that has been troubling her is hematomagic overload syndrome. Liddy looks up in confusion, questioning the name as an illustration shows how the disease infuses the bloodstream with magic, causing fatigue. He continues, explaining that the disease is so rare it's understandable it wasn't diagnosed, as only a doctor versed in magic could recognize it. Liddy looks distressed, protesting that she can't use magic or sorcery at all. Évariste clarifies that the illness strikes those who possess immense magical power, but have no way to release it. He confirms that while it's an extremely rare condition, her symptoms are a perfect match, leaving her utterly stunned. A single tear falls as she despairs, asking if she is going to be stuck suffering like this forever. Évariste takes her hands reassuringly, promising she won't have to suffer from her symptoms anymore, prompting her to ask why. With a hint of his fangs, he explains that his feeding will serve as her treatment. Liddy looks at him in utter disbelief, a lone tear on her cheek as she whispers, "What?" He points out that she feels better every time he drinks her blood, a fact she reluctantly confirms. He explains that removing magic and blood at the same time can cure the illness, a feat impossible for magic treatment, but entirely natural for a vampire's fangs. His gaze is intense, as he promises that from now on, she can live without fearing her illness. His crimson eyes soften as ethereal blue roses bloom around them. Overwhelmed, Liddy begins to cry as Evariste reaches for her, calling her name and apologizing for the sudden news. She breaks down in tears of joy, sobbing that she thought she'd never get better and is just so happy. As he gently strokes her hair, she looks up at him through her tears, confused by his tender gesture. He consoles her, acknowledging her pain and promising she won't have to face it alone anymore, because she has him now. He offers her a warm, genuine smile, full of reassurance. Liddy looks up at him, her heart fluttering as she softly says his name. He gently covers her eyes with his hand, shielding her gaze. The two lean in close, their faces nearly touching amidst a soft floral background. Liddy's eyes widen in surprise as he draws even closer, her breath catching in her throat. He reassures her not to worry, praising her remarkable composure and her strength in a difficult situation. Touched by his kind words, Liddy looks up at him with wide, emotional eyes. Evariste continues, recalling that he heard she was a brilliant student before her illness forced her to leave school. He commends her for staying strong and never giving up on learning, despite her limited conditions. Liddy, named in the panel, admits that leaving school was a terrible shock, but expresses hope that she might one day return if her health improves. Evariste's expression turns serious as he admits he has something he must apologize for. Confused by his sudden change in tone, Liddy asks what he means. He delivers the harsh news that sacrifices are erased from the kingdom's records, meaning she can never be enrolled in a national institution again. The devastating reality hits Liddy, her eyes wide with shock and despair. Evariste explains that because the kingdom hates him, even a mere sacrifice like her could easily become a target of their hatred. Liddy looks down sadly and apologizes, believing she is the cause of this problem. She quickly shakes her head, insisting it's not his fault at all. Looking down with resolve, Liddy thinks to herself that it doesn't matter. She reflects that since her family abandoned her, she likely would never have been able to return to school anyway. Looking up at Evariste, she decides that studying here would be far better than returning to a house that no longer accepts her. She catches herself, suddenly apologizing for speaking out of turn. With newfound joy, Liddy expresses her deep happiness, stating that the number of books in his library rivals any academy's, and she is free to read them. Evariste listens with a gentle smile, glad to hear she enjoys his collection of books. He then raises a point, however, noting that trying to solve difficult problems on her own might be a struggle. Liddy beams, explaining that this is exactly why she wants to develop the ability to research and solve problems independently. Evariste praises her admirable enthusiasm for learning, but calls her method quite inefficient. He offers a solution, asking to be her teacher, which leaves Liddy utterly stunned. Evariste confidently explains that his long life has given him vast knowledge, and he is particularly well qualified to teach her about magic. Flustered, Liddy thanks him for his kindness, but worries about taking his time, considering his many duties. He dismisses her concerns, explaining that he only receives requests once or twice a month and his duties are flexible enough to make time. With a gentle expression, he adds that, of course, he won't force her. Liddy quickly grabs his arm, clarifying that she didn't mean to refuse his incredible offer. Her heart pounds with excitement as she exclaims that being taught by someone so skilled in magic would be a tremendous honor. Evariste smiles, pleased with her answer, and declares that it's settled. He suggests they work on her study plan the next morning as he has some free time. Overwhelmed with emotion, Liddy thanks him, truly at a loss for words. Evariste tells her there's no need to thank him, as he genuinely wants to do this. Liddy looks on with a bright, hopeful smile. A narrator explains that Liddy's health steadily improved, allowing her to study every day as Evariste kept his promise to be her teacher. Now able to be active during the day, she was gifted so many beautiful dresses and accessories by him that she couldn't possibly wear them all. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Liddy feels that a lifetime would not be enough to repay his kindness. Amidst her newfound happiness, she reminds herself that she must not forget her place as a sacrifice who was offered up to him. The scene shifts to a view of the grand, towering bookshelves in the vast library. During a lesson, Liddy asks if lower-tier magic is also subject to limitations, and Evariste confirms that it is. She gasps in realization, connecting this new information to something that happened during the royal trial. In a cute, cartoonish flashback, a flustered Liddy begs a stoic, chibi Evariste for forgiveness. Back in the present, Evariste checks his pocket watch and notes that it's already noon. He turns his head and calls out for Roa. Roa, the blue-haired attendant, appears silently at the study door. Everest turns to Liddy and asks if she would like to come with him. Surprising her, she looks up with uncertainty, timidly asking if it's really okay for her to join him. Everest assures her that it is, explaining he's been meaning to introduce the two of them for some time. The grand doors swing open as Everest leads Liddy out of the library. They enter a lavish parlor where Julius sits comfortably, apologizing with a smile for dropping in unannounced. A handsome white-haired man with purple eyes sips from a teacup, apologizing to Eva for dropping in unannounced. Everest questions why the man isn't in a ruse for his research, but the man explains he had some unexpected free time. The white-haired man turns with a charming smile to greet Liddy. Looking radiant and healthy, Liddy brightly introduces herself as Liddy Zixanafar. The white-haired man says it's nice to meet her, explaining that Eva told him about her and asked for his opinion on becoming her personal doctor. Liddy looks surprised by the mention of a personal doctor. Everest explains that the man Julius is an expert in both magic and medicine and a researcher of magical diseases, making him the most suitable choice. A diagram of the human body surrounded by magical runes illustrates the definition of magical diseases, which are caused by magical power. An image of a grand building accompanies the explanation that a research institute was created to cure these diseases, but some, like Liddy's, remain a mystery. Everest reassures Liddy that his feeding has stabilized her symptoms, but suggests regular checkups just to be safe. Liddy listens to his words, her expression a mix of surprise and contemplation. Everest gazes at her with a gentle expression, silently wondering what he should do next. Overwhelmed with happiness, Liddy clutches her chest as it tightens with emotion. She and Everest share a peaceful moment, standing together under a beautiful arch of pink roses. Julius observes them, interrupting the moment with a single word. He agrees to help her, asking if he can take a blood sample right away for testing. Sitting at a desk, Julius explains that he'd like to bring the sample back to the institute for a more detailed examination. As the three sit together, Liddy gestures to the case on the table and asks what's inside. Julius presents a special syringe he developed, explaining that it can analyze both blood and magical power at once, though it only requires a small sample as it's still being refined. With a serious expression, Everest asks if the device is safe, given that it's still under development. Julius smiles confidently and assures him that it is perfectly safe. Turning to Liddy, Julius explains the procedure will feel like a small prick and asks if she is all right with that. Liddy bravely agrees and tells him to please go ahead. As Everest watches with a concerned gaze, Julius takes Liddy's hand to draw the blood sample. Julius's purple eyes narrow as he intently studies the vial of Liddy's blood. He announces that he's finished and asks if she's feeling unwell, to which a smiling Liddy replies that she feels perfectly fine. Julius informs Everest that he needs to leave the kingdom to take the sample to the research institute. Standing beside Liddy, Everest thanks Julius for making time for them despite his busy schedule. Everest invites Julius to stay longer on his next visit, but Julius politely declines, thanking him for the offer before departing. With a wave, Julius promises to return with the results of her examination as he leaves the room. The scene shifts to the Institute of Magical Diseases, showing shelves filled with potions and lab equipment. Click! In his lab, Julius carefully handles the test tube containing Liddy's blood, holding a slide of her blood up to the light. A wide, slightly unhinged smile spreads across his face as he declares, "This is amazing." He leans over his desk, trembling with excitement from his discovery. A dark shadow falls over his face as a sinister smile forms, and he thinks to himself, with this, his intense eyes gleam with a dark purpose as he thinks of Everest and Liddy together. A close-up shot focuses on the sparkling, multifaceted pink gem pinned to Julius's cravat. The scene changes to a quiet town street at night, illuminated by a crescent moon. As they walk, Everest thanks Liddy for the evening, but she insists she should be the one apologizing for keeping him up. Everest gazes at the moonlit town, explaining that since he still can't tolerate sunlight, he can only go outside at this hour. Liddy reassures him it's no trouble, and fondly recalls how wonderful the antique bookstore was that he showed her. She smiles, lost in the happy memory of their time together. Everest returns her smile, pleased she enjoyed it, and admitting he loves that place as well. Her heart skips a beat as she glances at him, moved by his words. Liddy remembers their walk through the antique shop, surrounded by wondrous and curious items. She then recalls them reading a book together, reflecting on his overwhelming kindness that almost frightens her. A dark vision shatters her reverie, showing a grim, hooded figure looming over her as she reminds herself not to forget her true position as a sacrifice. Her heart pounds in her chest as she looks at Évariste, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. Évariste turns his gaze toward her, a hint of concern in his red eyes. He asks if she is tired from her first trip outside the city, and Lydie quickly replies that she's fine. Lydie smiles with her eyes closed, feeling a moment of pure happiness. Évariste watches her tenderly, promising to accompany her anytime she wants to go out. Clank. Later that night, Évariste helps Lydie into an elegant carriage on a quiet, moonlit street. As the carriage moves, Lydie looks out with a soft smile and a thoughtful expression. Her smile fades as she spots a familiar figure in the distance, wondering if it's her sister, Lydie. Staring out the window, Lydie's confusion mounts as she recognizes the figure as her sister. A flashback shows Évariste taking Lydie's hand, his expression warm and content. Gritting her teeth, Michelle glares from afar, her mind consumed with the luxury of Lydie's dress and jewelry. A close-up highlights the exquisite detail of Lydie's attire, confirming they are indeed luxurious. Michelle seethes with rage, questioning why Lydie is being escorted like a prized sacrifice. The brown-haired man places a hand on her shoulder, asking what's wrong as she jumps in surprise. Michelle quickly dismisses his concern, turning away and insisting that it's nothing. In a dark fantasy, Michelle recalls thinking she had cast her sister into hell and wonders why Lydie now seems happier than she is. Her face contorts in a snarl as she vows to herself that she won't let her sister's happiness slide. Days later, on the day of Lord Julius's visit, Michelle arrives for an unexpected visit, flanked by the brown-haired maid and Roa. Lydie is stunned to see her sister in the grand hall, asking why she is there. Michelle approaches with a practiced smile while a nervous Lydie stammers a welcome. Lydie is deeply confused by her sister's presence, remembering how Michelle once claimed to hate her. Mia, the blue-haired maid, observes the reunion with a silent, watchful gaze. Internally, Mia questions if she should allow Michelle entry, but recalls that she already has the master's permission. Lydie turns to Mia, who looks on with concern. Reassuring her maid, Lydie says it's okay and not to worry, to which Mia reluctantly agrees. Mia then offers to guide Michelle and her attendant to the living room. The scene shifts to the opulent and empty living room where they are headed. In the living room, Michelle curtsies gracefully, introducing herself as the second daughter of the Zixinafar family. Évariste stands opposite her, formally introducing himself and stating he understands she has something to tell him. With a sly glance at her sister, Michelle suggests Lydie should leave the room to avoid what's coming. Michelle predicts Lydie will be very embarrassed, leaving her sister to wonder what she means. Évariste remains silent, his stoic expression fixed on the two sisters. Cutting through the tension, Évariste questions Michelle's intentions, asking what could possibly embarrass Lydie. Michelle glances back at the brown-haired maid behind her, beginning her explanation. As the maid presents a scroll, Michelle tells Évariste he'll understand once he sees it. Michelle unrolls the document on the table before Évariste and Lydie. Lydie looks on in stunned silence, her eyes wide with disbelief. The scroll reveals intimate paintings of her, and she demands to know where Michelle acquired them. Michelle claims she received them from a man named Artois, Lydie's supposed ex-lover, and maliciously suggests Lydie's blood might now be tainted. Lydie is shocked to hear the name Artois, questioning why he would be involved. Évariste asks if she knows him, and Lydie quietly confirms they were classmates. A tear escapes Lydie's eye, as she thinks to herself that she never showed herself to anyone in such a way. Lydie is tormented by confusion, wondering why Michelle, who she thought was happy, is now spreading lies after she has already lost everything. Surrounded by metaphorical, shattered glass, Lydie desperately wonders what more her sister could possibly want from her. A bitter memory surfaces of Michelle vowing to be the one to steal Lydie's happiness. Lydie's eyes fill with dawning horror as the memory hits her. A montage of her cherished moments with Évariste flashes through her mind as she fears Michelle intends to destroy this happiness as well. Michelle continues her false testimony, claiming Artois said he and Lydie were intimate since their school days. A caption from the painter's perspective romanticizes the moment, claiming her lips took him to heaven. Lydie desperately refutes the claim, crying out that it's not true at all. Michelle's expression shifts to a knowing smirk as she coolly agrees that, of course, it isn't true. She reveals that the scandalous images are nothing more than a stalker's fantasy, showing a vision of Finn Artois lost in his obsessive painting. The black-haired painter, Finn Artois, works with a crazed and obsessive look in his eyes. In a flashback, a blonde Michelle looks on with smug disapproval. Back in the present, Évariste acknowledges that the work is likely that of a man named Finn Artois. Lydie looks up at Évariste, a soft "ah" escaping her lips in surprise. Michelle, dressed in a grand pink gown, thinks to herself that a normal man would have gotten angry at her provocation. She smirks, her thoughts turning to a mole in a very specific, hidden place. Lydie gasps in shock, wondering how anyone could possibly know about her intimate mole unless they had seen her undressed. The silhouette of the painter, Finn, stands in a spotlight, the source of this intimate knowledge. Michelle scoffs at Lydie, thinking her sister looks absolutely ridiculous in her denial. She inwardly celebrates, grateful to the stalker-like painter for revealing a secret she never knew. Before Évariste, Michelle confronts Lydie, accusing her of having a relationship with Finn Artois, but Lydie passionately denies it. To prove her point, Michelle cruelly demands Lydie disrobe to check for the mole depicted in the painting, leaving Lydie speechless. Lydie thinks Michelle's accusation is vile, her face a mixture of hurt and disbelief, while her sister smirks victoriously. Trapped, Lydie despairs, realizing she has no way to prove her innocence against the malicious claim. As she wonders what to do, surrounded by symbolic red flowers, her sister's voice urges her to comply. With a sinister smile, Michelle's voice presses her, telling her to hurry up. Startled, Lydie turns to Évariste, stammering his name in a plea for help. Évariste calmly examines the scandalous painting that has caused such turmoil. He calls Michelle's name, and she answers readily, awaiting his judgment. A sharp glint flashes in Michelle's eye as she anticipates her victory. With a quiet intensity, Évariste sets the painting ablaze with his magic. Suddenly surrounded by flames, a stunned Michelle can only ask, "Huh?" Lydie is rendered speechless by his sudden and powerful action. Évariste looks down at Michelle, his expression cold, as he asks if her trivial accusations are all she came to say. A faint, dangerous smile plays on his lips, his red eyes glowing with power. The flames roar around him as he asserts his authority. Michelle looks on in terror as the fire explodes with magical force. Trapped within the inferno, she stares in utter disbelief and fear. She realizes with horror that his ability to use powerful magic without chanting is not normal as he advances on her. With a flame flickering in his hand, Évariste announces that it is time for her to listen to his judgment. A tear of pure terror falls from Michelle's eye. As Michelle screams, "Monster!" a wall of fire erupts, separating her from Lydie. Lydie watches in shock, questioning if he has conjured a wall of fire. Michelle lets out a shriek as she stumbles back from the intense magical heat. Trembling uncontrollably, Michelle weakly agrees to his command. Évariste declares that she has committed an unforgivable sin. He continues, stating that after she disgraced Lydie, Michelle's face twists in terror as she begins to beg for mercy. Extending a hand glowing with purple magic, Évariste sentences her to reap what she has sown as punishment for insulting Lydie. Overwhelmed by his power, Michelle is thrown to the floor and begins to apologize for her foolishness. She prostrates herself on the ground, trembling under his immense pressure. As she begs for her life, Évariste gazes down at her with cold indifference. He tells her to never forget the words she is speaking now. Relieved but still terrified, she tearfully thanks him, as he warns her there will be no second chance. Évariste delivers his command. She is to tell Finn Artois to destroy all his paintings of Lydie and is forbidden from creating more. Michelle agrees, but a memory of the obsessive painter suggests he might refuse to obey. Sensing her hesitation, Évariste asks if she intends to defy his order, causing her to panic and quickly deny it. He delivers a final, chilling threat. If she fails, both she and Artois will be punished. Michelle gulps, silenced by the absolute terror of his promise. Michelle slams her head to the floor in a desperate, groveling bow. Évariste stands silently over her bowed form, his hand hovering near his side. The magical fire recedes, leaving Évariste standing tall as Michelle remains prostrated on the floor. Watching from the side, a stunned Lydie lets out a soft, "Ah!" as Michelle stays frozen on the ground. Lydie looks on with a pained expression, seeing her sister so utterly defeated. Lydie thinks her sister's name with pity, which only infuriates the humiliated Michelle, who wonders why she's being looked down on. As Everest leads a dejected Michelle away, she tells Liddy she has more to say, but will hold her tongue for now. Michelle shoots a venomous glare over her shoulder, causing Liddy to flinch in alarm. A brown-haired maid stands guard as Michelle is escorted out, her face a mask of pure hatred directed at Liddy and Everest. Michelle vows that she will never give up until she witnesses Liddy's downfall, but Everest thinks her efforts are pointless with him there to protect her. Biting her thumb, Michelle grits her teeth, resolving that she will have to strike from the sidelines instead. Bam! The grand double doors swing shut, closing off the confrontation. Everest turns to Liddy with concern, asking if she is all right, but she can only stammer in response. Her eyes welling with tears, Liddy looks up at him and whispers his name. Standing beside him in the grand room, Liddy reminds herself that her presence is merely the result of a contract. Remembering her sister's shriek of, "Monster!" Liddy wonders how Everest can still believe in her purity after such an accusation. Everest smiles warmly, calling her name and reassuring her that, of course, he believes in her. He explains that in the time they've been together, he has come to understand her deep determination to survive. Overwhelmed by his words, Liddy is left speechless and deeply touched. Everest's expression grows serious as he inwardly reflects that perhaps he went too far in his display of power. Surrounded by an illusion of falling red petals, he worries that his actions may have frightened her too. He looks at Liddy and directly asks if she is also afraid of him now. He thinks about how reading the diaries of the castle's previous master made his power harder to control, causing him to use more than necessary. Liddy looks at him with steady eyes and says no, admitting that while she was surprised, she isn't afraid. She tells him not to hold back, explaining that, compared to him, she is the one who is truly a monster beyond reason, believing herself to be far worse. She takes his hand, looking up at him and pleading for him not to speak of himself in such a way. She explains that she knew the fire surrounding Michelle was just an illusion, and that he never intended to harm her. Liddy gazes at him, her expression full of unwavering trust. Everest is momentarily stunned by her astute perception and complete faith in him. A gentle, knowing smile graces Liddy's lips. She reveals that she even touched the magical flames directly and was not burned at all. His eyes widen in shock as he asks if she really touched the fire. Liddy explains that because he can use magic without chanting, she deduced he cast an illusion designed to look terrifyingly real. Surrounded by a vision of soft flowers, she states with absolute certainty that she truly believes he is not a monster. Deeply moved by her unwavering faith, Everest can only whisper her name. Liddy smiles wistfully, admitting her relationship with her sister might be broken, but she is still truly grateful for his kindness. Everest cautions her against lowering her guard so easily, causing her to look up at him in surprise. He quickly apologizes, thinking his words might have been too forward. Liddy reassures him that's not it at all, confessing she is actually very happy that he chose to believe in her. She raises a hand to his cheek, her voice soft as she admits her feelings about him, her words trailing off as she leans closer. He gazes at her tenderly as she blushes, her hand gently cupping his face in a moment of pure affection. Suddenly, a presence startles them both. Interrupting the intimate moment, Julius, the white-haired man, stands in the room with a sigh, announcing that their meeting time is already over. Everest and Liddy turn to look at the unexpected intruder. Everest's expression darkens as he glares at Julius, demanding to know how long he has been there. Julius simply chuckles, asking what's wrong, and teasingly remarking that Everest's face looks scary. He continues, reminding Everest that he would usually just laugh and forgive him for such mischief. A sly, knowing smirk plays on Julius's lips. The two men lock eyes as Julius glances toward Liddy, asking if she is what's making Everest so worried. Everest smirks, whispering to the silver-haired man that his panic made him completely unobservant. After Everest glares at him, the silver-haired man simply responds with a knowing, "Heh." In a lavish room, Julius reassures Everest, telling him not to worry because he didn't see anything. Julius elaborates that even if he had seen something, he wouldn't have romantic feelings for a sacrifice. Standing nearby in a new white and lilac gown, a confused Liddy wonders what they are talking about. Everest approaches Julius with Liddy, apologizing for missing their appointment, but Julius kindly dismisses his apology. Holding a scroll, Julius smiles and suggests they quickly get to the blood test and medical interview. Later, Julius presents his findings to Liddy and Évariste, starting with the results of her blood test. He explains that Liddy's symptoms are severe and could lead to death if she goes untreated. However, Julius offers a silver lining. As long as Liddy remains the sacrifice, her health should remain stable. Julius gratefully thanks Liddy for her cooperation, and she expresses her own thanks in return. Julius further explains that for Évariste, or quote, Eva, consuming live blood is a critical necessity, making Liddy's condition the ideal solution for now. As Liddy and Évariste sit in silence, the word sacrifice echoes in her mind. She understands that Évariste's health will deteriorate if he doesn't continue to consume live blood. Liddy reflects that while she knew she was needed, she was never fond of her role as a sacrifice. He pushes himself up slightly, looking down at her still form. Liddy lies trembling on the bed, breathing heavily. Worried, Évariste leans over her, asking if she feels any pain. Suddenly overcome by a strange sensation, Liddy gasps, startling a confused Évariste. Flushed and breathing heavily, Liddy apologizes, explaining that her body feels strange. She admits that she's been feeling this way the entire time. Clutching the pillow, she realizes this is the first time her reaction has been so intense. Évariste watches her silently, observing her condition. After a moment, he looks away grimly, admitting that her condition might be his fault. Confused and blushing, Liddy looks up at him and asks what he means. Évariste reveals that he's heard that increasing the frequency of bloodsucking can also strengthen its arousal effect. Liddy is stunned, as Évariste reassures her that it's harmless to her body and not her fault. Greatly relieved, Liddy asks if this strange condition will improve over time. Évariste bluntly says no, explaining that a forcibly triggered arousal won't subside on its own. Horrified, Liddy asks what she's supposed to do. He explains the only way is for him to touch her body and bring her to the peak of pleasure, leaving her speechless. He suggests she think of it as part of her healing, but a shocked Liddy immediately refuses. With tears in her eyes, Liddy turns away and apologizes. Évariste gazes at her with a pained and conflicted expression. He apologizes, admitting that what he is asking is inappropriate and impolite. Liddy says she doesn't want to trouble him, but Évariste insists he doesn't find the request inappropriate at all. He gently calls her name, his expression softening. Caressing her face, he promises that he will never think of her as a burden. He leans in to kiss her neck, whispering that he will take responsibility, as she gasps. Lying next to her, he tenderly whispers her name. He internally confesses that his growing feelings for her have likely strengthened the arousal effect without him realizing it. Liddy responds to his touch, embracing him as he continues to kiss her. He whispers close to her ear, telling her not to be afraid and that he only wants to make her feel better. As he holds her, Évariste thinks that he can't live without her blood. He resolves not to destroy their peaceful relationship or let his filthy desires taint it. He sees a vision of Liddy surrounded by dark hands, resolving to suppress his desire for her as quickly as possible. Liddy later recalls how her mind went blank and she lost consciousness, overcome by tension and strange sensations. As Liddy sleeps, Évariste watches over her and apologizes, telling her not to feel sorry and to simply accept his actions. As Évariste holds her, Liddy worries about being a burden to him. Liddy reaffirms her purpose as a sacrifice for Lord Évariste, resolving to fulfill her duty. In his study, Évariste praises Liddy's academic work, telling her that her theory on magic diseases is excellent. He tells her that dinner is ready and that she should go to the dining room while he returns to his study. Liddy watches silently as Évariste walks away from her. With a sad expression, Liddy realizes she will be eating alone again. She recalls that Lord Évariste doesn't eat regular food because it doesn't satisfy his hunger, and he can't taste it. Liddy remembers a time when he still used to join her in the dining room, despite his condition. She reflects that lately he's been busy with government matters, which is why he spends so much time in his study. Liddy worries that he's avoiding her because of the incident with her sister Michelle, and feels overwhelmed by her own feelings. She concludes with the heartbreaking thought that she is a failure as a sacrifice. A promotional interlude showcases various characters from other stories. Startled from her thoughts, Liddy turns as Mia, the maid, announces that dinner is ready. Liddy tells Mia she will be there shortly, standing up from her desk. As she follows Mia down a long, lavish corridor, Liddy walks in silence. Liddy remains lost in thought as she walks beside the stoic maid. Mia breaks the silence, asking a surprised Liddy if she is all right. Nodding, Liddy seems worried, Mia expresses her concern, to which Liddy gives a quiet thanks. Liddy is internally shocked, realizing this is the first time Mia has spoken to her directly. She thinks back on her feeling that Mia and Roa don't seem to like her. Her mind races as she wonders what could have possibly changed. Mia asks if Liddy was surprised by her show of concern. A jolt of shock runs through a chibi-styled Liddy, who covers her mouth in surprise. Mia explains that she and Roa have seen nobles get scared or even hurt by their masters, so they were cautious. Liddy recalls her own past fear of Evariste, admitting she was frightened of him before she knew him. Roa appears and tells Liddy that she's been incredibly supportive, and because of her, the master has changed. Mia adds that since the master seems more lively now, she is no longer on guard. Liddy looks confused, questioning what Mia means by more lively. Mia explains that the master genuinely seems to enjoy talking with her, and the household is running smoothly because of it. A soft smile touches Liddy's lips as she expresses her gladness. While they walk, Liddy privately wonders if Lord Evariste's kindness is merely pity for her illness and status. Mia falls silent, observing Liddy with a thoughtful expression. Later that night, Evariste works alone in his grand study. A bat reports to Evariste, confirming it spied on Michel and a man named Finn Artois at the academy, but found nothing suspicious. The bat continues, revealing that Artois has been warning off other men who have crushes on Lady Liddy. The bat explains Artois' loyalty stems from his family's service and his long-standing connection to Lord Lorjou since childhood. Evariste notes that this development has saved him some trouble. A bat flies from the study window, leaving Evariste to his work. Two bat familiars rest inside the quiet, lamplit study. Evariste looks up as Mia, in her bat form, appears, asking what's wrong. Mia reports that Liddy has been worried about him, prompting Evariste to ask what she means. Evariste admits he's been intentionally keeping his distance, thinking he was spending too much time with Liddy. He becomes suddenly flustered as his attendants seem to scold him. The bats remind him it's forbidden to mistreat a human after intimacy, and warn that his health will decline if she leaves. Evariste confidently thinks to himself that Liddy wouldn't be able to survive anywhere else but his castle. A bat sternly advises him to treat Liddy carefully, warning that a desperate woman is unpredictable and he'll never find a better sacrifice. Evariste listens to their counsel in contemplative silence. The scene shifts to the exterior of a magnificent white castle surrounded by lush trees. Liddy arrives at a grand doorway where Julius greets her, apologizing for the wait. As Julius tells her he came specifically to see her, a shocked Liddy looks on in disbelief. Flustered, Liddy asks what he means by his shocking question. Evariste tells her Julius must have figured out what he had previously explained to her. Julius confirms his suspicion with a smile, asking Liddy if it's a difficult experience every night. Blushing, Liddy is taken aback that Lord Julius would talk about such intimate matters. Julius apologizes for teasing her and explains he's working on a special bloodletting method to control her condition without her needing to be bitten. Liddy looks up in astonishment, asking if such a thing is even possible. He explains that to develop a method to manage hematomagic overload, he requires her help. Liddy looks on in thought, quietly questioning his need for her assistance. Julius formally asks for her help, requesting to regularly check her blood and fluids at his lab. With a worried expression, Liddy hesitates, mentioning the presence of nobles and royalty at the research center. She reflects on her desire to help, in order to give hope to others suffering from the same condition. However, she worries that any negative rumors about her could damage Lord Evariste's reputation and resolves to answer carefully. Liddy stands silently before Julius, her expression filled with uncertainty. He reassures her that the researchers will simply see her as a patient with hematomagic overload syndrome. With a gentle smile, he adds that participating is also for Lord Evariste's sake, earnestly asking for her help. Surprised, Liddy wonders what he means by that. Julius reiterates that her help would be for Lord Evariste's sake, emphasizing his request. Her eyes widen in confusion as she tries to understand his meaning. Julius reveals his method could create a stable supply of blood, freeing Evariste from ever needing to sacrifice again. Thump. Her heart pounds as she clutches her chest, shocked by the implication. She stares ahead, realizing that if he no longer needs a sacrifice, she will no longer be needed at all. Julius explains his goal is to free them both from the tragic roles they are bound to, making his research a success. Liddy lowers her gaze, clutching her brooch in quiet contemplation. She realizes Evariste is only keeping her by his side out of kindness until another cure is found, despite the pain her existence causes him. With newfound resolve, she thinks that forcing him to remain bound to her is unforgivable. Julius watches her with a knowing, subtle smile. Leaning closer, he tells her she doesn't have to decide right away. He gently takes her hand, asking her to simply think about his offer. A memory of being held by Évariste amidst a shower of roses and dark feathers flashes through her mind. The scene transitions, filled with falling petals and feathers. Évariste's piercing red eyes narrow with intense focus. Across from him, Julius maintains a placid, confident smile. Julius turns to Évariste, explaining he was just asking Lady Letty for a small favor. Évariste eyes him suspiciously, questioning what kind of favor. Gesturing toward an illustration, Julius explains that Lady Letty's cooperation would greatly accelerate his research. From across the grand room, Letty watches the two men converse. Her expression is full of concern as she awaits the outcome of their discussion. Évariste questions why Julius didn't mention this sooner, but Julius dismisses his concern by citing her upcoming checkup. Julius hints that some matters are better discussed without Évariste present. He then states the simple fact that Lady Letty is, after all, the vampire duke's sacrifice. Julius explains that because Letty sees herself as merely a sacrifice, she might be uncomfortable with Évariste accompanying her. Évariste recalls telling Letty about the nobility's disapproval of the sacrificial system, and realizes this is the source of her worries. Julius reassures him that Letty will be treated simply as a patient, and suggests Évariste can accompany her if he remains worried. He then casually mentions that while experiments may make her ill, Évariste's, quote, usual aftercare should help her recover quickly. Julius points out that meeting new people would be a welcome change from being confined to the castle, causing Évariste to ponder. He adds that the young researchers could become her friends, opening up her world with new perspectives. Évariste lowers his gaze, silently contemplating the word friends. His thoughts drift to a vision of Letty standing alone before a crowd of judging shadows. Calling her name, Évariste gets Letty's attention, and she answers nervously. He gazes at her intently and asks what she wants to do, leaving the final choice in her hands. From across the grand room, Évariste warns Letty that going to the lab will be dangerous, and he won't always be there to rescue her. He tells her he won't stop her from going, and she stammers in reply, unsure what to say. Letty thinks she doesn't want to cause him more worry, but she also cannot endure him facing such a fate for her sake. Looking at him with resolve, she declares her wish to help with the research, and formally asks for his permission. Évariste smiles gently, telling Letty she doesn't need his permission for anything, as a cheerful voice declares the matter decided. Julius appears beside Évariste, happily announcing he'll get everything ready for her today. Letty sincerely thanks Lord Julius, who laughs and insists he should be the one thanking her. Taking her hand, Julius tells her that her cooperation is truly appreciated. Julius smiles with a hint of cunning as his purple eyes glint in the shadows. The scene transitions to the inside of a vast, well-stocked laboratory filled with books, potions, and alchemical equipment. As Julius and Évariste lead Letty into the lab, Évariste apologizes to Julius for his presence. Julius smiles and reassures him not to worry, as researchers are used to working late. Letty takes in the sight of the impressive laboratory with a curious gaze. A wider view reveals the grand scale of the Magical Disease Research Institute, a well-equipped facility so secret few have ever entered. Julius leads them to a door, explaining it is the location of the Department for Demon Blood Research. He introduces himself as the department's director and offers his assistance should she encounter any issues. Letty thanks him, and as she turns away, Julius thinks to himself that researching demonic blood could open many other possibilities. Letty quietly wonders what possibilities he meant, guessing it might be related to other diseases or new medicines. Inside, several researchers in lab coats are spread throughout the main hall. A brown-haired woman greets Director Julius before noticing Letty, while Leon Claude looks on from below, blushing intensely. Julius formally presents Letty, announcing that she will be assisting with his research starting today. With a gentle smile, Letty introduces herself and says it's a pleasure to meet them all. A young male researcher thinks she's cute, while the brown-haired woman marvels that she looks like a real doll. The brown-haired woman warmly welcomes Letty to their department. As the researchers begin to react with alarm, Évariste's eyes flare red with protective intensity. Évariste introduces himself as Évariste Loge, stating he's only there as Letty's escort and should be ignored. The brown-haired woman introduces herself as Maria, the head of the department, and promises Letty a comfortable experience. Maria and her colleagues, formally welcome Miss Liddy to the Institute. Leon stands before Liddy, blushing as he looks at her. Liddy looks back at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Leon reminds her of a school contest where she won the top prize and he, as part of the student council, gave her the certificate. Ha! A memory sparks, and Liddy gasps in realization. She remembers him now as the infamous student council president, Leon Claude. Leon lights up, thrilled that she remembers who he is. Liddy explains that while they only exchanged a few words, the memory stayed with her. Leon admits that she left a lasting impression on him, and that he was surprised to hear she left school because of an illness. Liddy smiles, saying she's honored to be told that. The two stand together, sharing a pleasant moment of reunion. From a distance, Évariste watches them interact, his expression hardening as his red eyes narrow. Julius cheerfully steps in, asking Leon to help with Liddy's examination, which Leon readily agrees to. Julius announces it's time to move to the examination room and instructs Liddy to follow them. Liddy, Julius, and Leon walk toward a brightly lit doorway, ready to begin the research. After a day of tests where her blood and tissues were collected, the examination finally concludes. Later that evening, Liddy and Évariste sit together on her bed. He gently caresses her cheek as she admits she was nervous speaking to people after so long. She smiles brightly, adding that above all else, she had a lot of fun. Liddy reflects on her day, grateful to have finally discussed magical studies, a passion she had to give up when she left the academy. Noticing his silence, Liddy looks at Évariste with concern and asks if he is all right. Évariste looks away with a troubled expression, while Liddy smiles, saying she's glad the trip was good for him too, and thanks him. She earnestly tells him not to worry and to continue consuming her blood as he normally would. Évariste holds Liddy in a gentle embrace on the bed, their gazes locked in a tender moment. Lying amongst scattered rose petals, Liddy looks up at Évariste with a soft gasp. Évariste leans down, whispering Liddy's name as he moves closer. Lying back, Liddy looks up in flushed confusion. He pulls her into a tight embrace, and she lets out a surprised sound. As Évariste kisses her neck, Liddy breathes out, her eyes closed in the moment. She weakly tries to tell him to stop, her face flushed with emotion. He gently caresses her neck, his intense gaze fixed on her. Évariste tells her that she doesn't have to hold back as she trembles beneath him. Liddy shyly buries her face in the pillow, her bright blue eyes peeking out. He leans in again, his lips brushing against her skin in a passionate kiss. A narrator explains that Liddy began visiting the lab weekly as she and Évariste walked through a grand hall. Liddy reflects that while she feels bad for Évariste always accompanying her, her heart is full from being with him. Dining alone, she muses that he seems to avoid her, except when he needs to drink her blood. The scene shifts to a bustling research lab 3 months later. Leon Claude asks Liddy what she thought of a book he recommended, and she happily replies it was very interesting. Liddy connects a topic in the book to a paper Leon previously published, and he asks if she means the one from the library newsletter. She beams, confirming that she found his paper to be a very interesting read. Leon's face lights up with a blush as he expresses his surprise and delight that she read it. He recalls writing it when he first enrolled, admitting it feels naive and embarrassing now. With a bright, happy smile, Leon tells her he's glad she enjoyed it. Évariste and Julius arrive, observing Liddy and Leon's cheerful conversation from a distance. Julius smiles, commenting to Évariste on how well Liddy and Leon are getting on, to which Évariste stiffly agrees. Julius questions Évariste's presence, reminding him of his phantom beast hunt for the army. Évariste confirms he's about to leave. Liddy laughs joyfully, her happiness radiating like sparkles in the library. Julius volunteers to escort Liddy back to the castle, and Évariste thanks him. Évariste resolves to finish his mission quickly so he can return. As he watches Liddy, he silently promises to come back for her. Julius lets out a small, knowing laugh as he observes Évariste. Julius remarks that Évariste is making Liddy feel special as they both watch her from behind. Évariste remains silent, his expression unreadable and serious. Julius advises Évariste to consider his place in the world, dismissing his feelings as a mere vampire's instinct. He clarifies that this instinct is simply the drive to monopolize demon blood. Julius's purple eyes narrow with grim intensity. He bluntly states that vampires are not compatible with humans as Liddy stands before Évariste, surrounded by bats. Évariste glares and mutters Julius's name, while Julius gives a cheerful wave goodbye. Évariste watches silently as Liddy, Julius, and Leon walk away together, He thinks to himself that he doesn't need Julius to tell him the truth. Évariste reflects that he never thought a monster like him could have a relationship with Liddy. He admits there's no way to know if his feelings are genuine or just a vampire's instinct. Blushing and covering his mouth, he concedes that he can't deny his feelings for her. In a different room, Maria concludes a session with Liddy, who confirms she understands. Maria expresses concern that Liddy seems unwell due to a recent experiment, but Liddy insists she's fine, hoping Évariste's bite will cure her. Liddy suddenly stumbles, clutching her chest as a wave of dizziness hits her. A tear streams down her face as she worries about Évariste's dangerous expedition and feels an urgent need to return. Leon stops Liddy, informing her she'll go home with Julius and offering to walk her to the director's office. Noting the distance to the office, Leon kindly offers Liddy his hand for support. He gently encourages her not to be shy since they're friends, and she quietly thanks him. Leon supports Liddy as they walk together down an ornate hallway. Overcome with dizziness, Liddy sweats and struggles to keep walking. From a dark and empty hallway, an ominous sound echoes. Suddenly, a brown-haired man grabs Liddy, who gasps in confusion. The man shouts a desperate "Look out!" with a look of panic. He pulls her into a protective embrace, his face etched with worry as he holds her. To the man's shock, Évariste appears and catches Liddy instead, holding her gently. Évariste holds the unconscious Liddy in his arms, murmuring her name as she lets out a soft sound. He worries internally, noting that for her to faint like this, her breathing is dangerously erratic. The brown-haired man watches them, his expression tense as he identifies Évariste Lajeux. Évariste turns to the man, addressing him as Leon Claude and apologizing for the trouble. Startled, Leon Claude quickly dismisses the apology and suggests the experiment must be affecting her health. Évariste tells him not to worry, stating he is fully aware of the risks involved in her participation. Leon Claude lowers his gaze, thanking Évariste for his understanding. Announcing his departure, Évariste turns to leave with Liddy in his arms, bidding the man goodbye. Left alone in the hallway, Leon Claude watches them go, a bead of sweat on his temple. Évariste carries the still unconscious Liddy down the ornate corridor. Pat! Her eyes flutter open as she slowly regains consciousness in his arms. Évariste looks down at her with a relieved smile, thankful she's awake and asking if she realized she had fainted. Confused, Liddy asks why he's there, and he explains he finished his work early and came to pick her up. Liddy understands, realizing that's why he was there to catch her fall. Blushing furiously in his arms, she apologizes for losing consciousness. Évariste tells her to stay still for her own safety, insisting she'll have to remain in his arms as she stammers in protest. Her gaze falls on his neck, and she thinks with concern that he still has scars. Looking up at him urgently, Liddy pleads with Évariste to hurry and drink her blood. Taken aback, Évariste realizes her intent and replies that he will heal by drinking her blood once they return to the castle. With tears in her eyes, Liddy insists it has to be now and begs him please. Évariste gazes down at her with a pained expression, softly saying her name. In his thoughts, he remembers how much pain she was in. Liddy looks back, her own pained expression mirroring his thoughts. They stand silently before a closed door, Évariste's quiet contemplation hanging in the air. Évariste gently lays a flushed Liddy down on a bed, leaning over her tenderly. In a romantic haze of roses, he takes her hand and leans in, his fangs showing as he whispers her name. He bites into her neck, a sigh of relief escaping his lips as he holds her hand tightly. The two of them float peacefully within a shimmering blue orb of energy. Tisk! Leon Claude is revealed to be watching them through the magical orb, his expression filled with shock and dismay. Back in the room, Liddy flinches with a soft gasp as Évariste drinks from her neck. Horrified, Leon Claude watches and thinks about how Évariste could force himself on her. He thinks that Évariste only pretended to be a gentleman, but his true nature is that of a blood-feasting creature, as a vampiric image of Évariste appears. Évariste continues to drink from Liddy's neck, his fangs embedded in her skin. Liddy lies beneath him, flushed, and her mouth slightly agape. Évariste's red eye glows with intensity as he feeds. Watching through the orb, Leon Claude is terrified as Évariste's glowing eye seems to look right at him, making him wonder if he was seen. The orb of light suddenly intensifies, and Leon Claude raises his hands in shock. He looks on in disbelief as the magical connection shatters. Gasping, His eyes widen in pure shock and fear. Leon Claude reels, realizing Everest must have used Transcendence magic, an unbelievable feat to achieve with just a glance. He trembles, concluding that Everest's immense power makes him far too dangerous to be near Liddy. The scene shifts to Julius, who calmly informs a shaken Leon Claude that the expensive scrying device is now broken. Leon Claude explains he got worried because Liddy's withdrawal notice hadn't arrived, and then everything spiraled out of control. Realizing the gravity of what he witnessed, Leon Claude panics about saving Liddy, but Julius calmly tells him to stop. Julius informs a concerned Leon Claude that Liddy is the sacrifice, which is a healing process, and tells him he has no reason to interrupt. Leon Claude internally reflects on Liddy's flushed state, suspecting aphrodisiac magic and deeming it a deviant act to toy with her desires publicly. Leon states that this is not an appropriate attitude to have towards a sacrifice, while Julius listens thoughtfully. Smiling gently, Julius reveals that he has known Eva for a very long time. He elaborates that Everest is a gentleman by nature, but loses his reason when it comes to Liddy, and his obsession could become dangerous. Tisk! Leon Claude asks in alarm if Liddy will remain captive even after the technique is perfected, and Julius calmly confirms that's right. Julius explains that Everest will control her for life, as this is the inherent vampire instinct. He continues his dark warning, suggesting that if Everest has lost his mind, Liddy will be trapped forever, as a vision shows Everest biting her neck. Leon Claude is horrified by this revelation, thinking, "No way!" Julius calmly reassures the distraught Leon Claude that it's all right. As Leon looks on in confusion, Julius explains that he isn't the only person worried about Liddy. Turning to a door, Julius says he will introduce Leon to someone else who wants to meet him. Leon stands in the doorway, greeted by an off-screen voice saying, "Nice to meet you." The person is revealed to be Michelle, who formally introduces herself as Michelle Zixinifar. Julius explains that Michelle is Liddy's sister and also the fiancée of an investor's son. Michelle tells them she was surprised to learn Julius was her sister's doctor, as they had grown distant since Liddy became a sacrifice. Leon Claude quietly affirms her statement. He reflects on how worrying it is that someone so brilliant at the academy had to cut her studies short due to illness and sacrifice. Remembering a sad-looking Liddy from their academy days, Leon's thoughts reveal he has been concerned for her all this time. He thinks to himself that now that they have met again, the thought completes over a shot of Michelle's determined face. A flashback reveals Leon Claude was the handsome and popular student council president at the academy. Kaya. Adoring female students swoon over senior Claude, begging him to accept their love letters. In a sharp internal monologue, Michelle questions if he has truly been concerned about her sister since their academy days. She seethes with rage, recalling how he never even remembered her face back then. Her fury grows as she remembers seeing Liddy and Leon acting friendly at the research institute, finding it infuriating. Michelle grits her teeth, her eyes glowing with intense jealousy. Deciding this is the perfect opportunity, she resolves to use Leon to lead her sister to ruin. Back in the present, Michelle and Leon Claude face each other as he snaps out of his thoughts. He apologizes for his distraction and properly introduces himself as Leon Claude. Michelle offers a slight, knowing smile in return. After shaking his hand, Michelle apologizes for being so sudden and asks Lord Claude for a favor. She looks at him with pleading eyes, asking for his help in freeing her sister. Leon repeats Liddy's name in surprise, and Michelle explains it's a complicated matter she would like to discuss with him. Leon readily agrees to help in any way he can, while Michelle's eyes narrow with cunning satisfaction. The scene transitions to the grand, ornate interior of a palace-like building. Leon Claude watches from a distance as Everest and a nervous Liddy walk towards him down the corridor. Liddy greets a blushing Leon, looking forward to working with him, while he stammers her name in response. Composing himself, Leon tells Liddy he also looks forward to working with her. As Leon walks away, Liddy watches him, internally noting that his strange behavior started the night she fell ill. Standing beside a stoic Everest, she worries if she might have acted inappropriately towards Leon. Everest watches Leon's retreating figure with a sharp, calculating gaze. Julius approaches the pair, addressing them as Liddy Eva, and asking for a moment of their time. He invites them to attend the Institute's anniversary party next week. Everest questions the invitation, and Julius confirms it's for both of them, explaining that investors and royalty want to see them in person. Julius elaborates that patients who have recovered from hematomagic overload syndrome are exceptionally rare. Anticipating an objection, Julius insists that keeping his investors happy is part of his job. Evarista expresses his concern that sending Liddy to a large gathering would be dangerous and difficult to secure. Julius reassures him, promising to personally ensure Lily's safety and to have Leon escort her as an extra precaution. Julius smiles warmly at Liddy, leaning in to ask for her opinion. Liddy looks away, thinking she wants to avoid being a burden or a hassle for someone named Claude. Liddy admits to Evariste that she's often avoided and would be happy to go, while Julius explains that the Institute's success benefits them both. Startled, Evariste acknowledges her point but seems to have a reservation. With a determined gaze, Liddy remains silent in her contemplation. Turning to Evariste, she agrees to cooperate, but only if he is all right with it. Julius celebrates her decision with a cheerful, "Yay!" thanking her profusely as she quietly accepts. As he prepares to leave, Julius tells them he'll inform the director, then pauses as he remembers one more thing. He casually informs Evariste that he has also invited Liddy's family to the party. Julius slyly suggests inviting the prince would be perfect, causing Evariste's expression to harden as he questions Julius's motives. Julius glances back at Evariste and Liddy, a silent moment passing between them. Evariste wonders how Julius knows so much about his plans, questioning the extent of his information network. On the day of the anniversary party, Mia the maid opens a grand door and welcomes someone in. Liddy enters a luxurious room, adorned in a beautiful new gown for the celebration. Dressed in an elegant gown with white roses in her hair, Liddy looks radiant. Evariste, looking handsome in his formal attire, tells Liddy the dress suits her, and she returns the compliment. Blushing with a fluttering heart, Liddy shyly thanks him for the compliment. A full-length view showcases Liddy's magnificent blue and white lace gown in front of an ornate mirror. Liddy marvels at her reflection, thinking she has never worn anything so beautiful. Evariste approaches her from behind, asking her to hold still as he reveals a custom-ordered accessory to match her dress. He fastens a delicate necklace around her neck, noting how striking it looks against her pale skin. Flustered by his words and proximity, Liddy can barely manage a response. She tries to compose herself, assuming he only prepared the necklace so they would match. Clap. At the party, Julius addresses the crowd, explaining how his research can stabilize hematomagic overload syndrome. He credits the dedicated cooperation of a recovered patient for providing the crucial data that has advanced their work. Before the packed ballroom, Julius proudly announces that their research's accuracy has vastly improved. Clap! The audience of nobles erupts in enthusiastic applause for his announcement. Liddy is moved, realizing just how many people are counting on this research and seeing her cooperation in a new light. Julius concludes his presentation for the time being, standing proudly with Evariste and Liddy. Evariste and Liddy both thank Julius, crediting him for the event's great success. Holding 2 glasses of wine, Julius looks on with a satisfied expression. Julius deflects their praise, insisting their presence saved the event and acknowledging it must have been tiring. He kindly offers Evariste a glass of wine, noting he must be thirsty. Liddy accepts a glass of red wine with a word of thanks. As Julius sips his own drink, Liddy brings her glass to her lips. Julius smiles and encourages Evariste and Liddy to relax and enjoy the party. Julius reminds Evariste that the Forbidden Library is off-limits, but Evariste retorts he'll break through anyway before inviting Liddy to join him. Smiling, Liddy accepts Lord Evariste's outstretched hand. Their hands clasp in a tender, romantic moment surrounded by rose petals. Guests in the grand hall murmur in awe as they watch the couple. Liddy takes Evariste's arm, the two of them appearing as a stunning and powerful pair. A group of nobles gossip, calling Liddy lovely but pitying her as a sacrifice destined for heartbreak. Another guest wonders who the handsome man beside Liddy is, captivated by his beauty. The partygoers buzz with rumors, realizing the handsome man is the vampire duke and expressing surprise that he isn't ugly. Michelle appears in the crowd, glaring with rage as she wonders why Liddy and Evariste are drawing so much attention. She grits her teeth, reminding herself that she must endure their presence to carry out her plan. As Liddy and Evariste walk, he turns to greet an approaching group with a polite, "Good day." Michelle formally greets her sister and the Duke, with Viscount Zixenafar, her mother, and the brown-haired man behind her. Liddy's heart pounds in shock as she recognizes her younger sister, Michelle. As her family looks on, Liddy grows wary of her sister's intentions and resolves to be careful not to cause trouble for Evariste. As Liddy and Everest watch, Michelle hugs her sister, crying that she is truly sorry. Liddy gasps in shock as Michelle, trembling with remorse, apologizes once more for her past rudeness. Evariste looks on impassively as Michelle begins to explain about the magical attacks. Trembling in terror, Michelle begs for her life and asks for forgiveness. As the guests murmur, a brown-haired man in the crowd looks on with deep concern. Suddenly, a brown-haired man in a military uniform grabs Michelle, accusing someone of commanding a monster to kill her. Startled, Liddy utters the name Clyde. Viscount Zixnafar and the woman with the fan watch with disdain as the Viscount scoffs, questioning if someone thought murder by magic would go unnoticed. Evariste remains silent as the Viscount condemns him as a monster and a criminal beyond redemption. The Viscount throws a punch, but his wrist is intercepted with a sharp smack. Evariste glares with his crimson eyes, having effortlessly caught the Viscount's fist as he addresses him by name. The Viscount grunts in disbelief as Evariste's grip tightens around his wrist. Evariste coolly accuses Viscount Zixenafar of impersonating a family member to conduct extortion, stating that he has received reports. Holding a document, Evariste states the charges are serious, while the Viscount clicks his tongue in annoyance. The Viscount dismisses the accusations as baseless nonsense with no proof whatsoever. He then argues that Evariste has no right to judge the affairs of another country. A man with long silver hair appears, calmly stating that he will hear the story in the king's place. The Viscount turns, angrily demanding to know who the newcomer is. The man introduces himself with regal authority as Fios, the second prince of the Duchy of Mazzena. Stunned, Viscount Zixenafar stammers in disbelief, demanding to know why a prince is there. The Viscount's mind races, wondering if he's a fake, but he recognizes the undeniable royal emblem. Prince Fios explains he's been investigating the area, causing the Viscount to react in shock to the mention of relatives. The Viscount furiously denies the possibility of a prince having relatives among low-ranking nobles, but Fios meets his outburst with a steely gaze. Fios recalls the capture of a man who impersonated the Viscount for embezzlement, deciding the effort was worthwhile if it can be of use to Lord Evariste. The guests gossip about the irony of the Viscount situation, realizing he'll lose more than just his title for defrauding a prince's relative. Liddy is horrified by the turn of events, thinking it's the worst possible outcome. Michelle panics, insisting it's all a mistake and a conspiracy by the Vampire Duke before collapsing into tears. The woman with the fan shoves the Viscount away, screaming that she has nothing to do with his crimes. The Viscount, Michelle, and the woman with the fan turn and flee through the grand hall. With a flash of purple energy, Evariste raises his hand to cast a spell. Clang! Magical chains erupt and form a massive birdcage, trapping the fleeing family. Michelle screams to be let out, while her parents stare in horror from behind the magical bars. Flanked by guards, Prince Fios informs the imprisoned family they can save their excuses for later. Michelle and her mother look on in horror, shocked by the prince's cold decree. As Fios and his royal guards watch, the family protests from within their magical prison, calling the situation outrageous. Clyde furiously confronts Evariste, calling him a bastard and warning him not to lay a hand on Michelle. Evariste calmly tells him to stop making a fuss, stating there are no restrictions on using magic to apprehend criminals. Clyde turns his glare on Liddy, damning her for appeasing a monster. Liddy watches him coolly, thinking his true nature remains hidden, as a disembodied voice warns, "Mind your tongue, Clyde Series." With eyes glowing red, Evariste thinks that he could destroy a mere count at any moment, and that Clyde is only alive because of his mercy. Evariste concludes his silent threat, warning Clyde to never show his face before them again. As Evariste turns his back, Clyde stands stunned and defeated. Thud! Clyde collapses to his knees on the ballroom floor in utter despair. Evariste and Liddy walk together down the now quiet hall. Liddy anxiously asks if her father is truly a fraud, and Evariste gently apologizes for not telling her sooner. Evariste explains his work with the prince on the matter, but Liddy cuts him off, indicating that's not her main concern. With a pained but resolute expression, Liddy declares that she wants her father to pay for his crimes, even if he is her family. She reflects that despite her family's cruelty after she fell ill, her heart still aches as she remembers happier times. A memory surfaces of a happy family portrait from her childhood with her parents and a younger Michelle. As a tear falls, Liddy grieves, knowing those happy days will never return. As Everest gazes down silently, Liddy looks up, her voice trembling as she questions his sudden intensity. He gently cups her face and makes a solemn promise to stay by her side, now and forever. Overwhelmed by his vow, Liddy's eyes fill with tears as she questions if they can truly be together forever. Suddenly, the brown-haired man rushes down the hall, shouting Liddy's name in a panic. He reaches them, explaining he heard her family was in trouble and asking if she is all right. Liddy covers her face in distress as the man apologizes, realizing how foolish his question was. He kindly suggests she rest in a nearby room, acknowledging how tired she must be from everything that has happened. Liddy begins to protest, but Everest fixes the man with a silent, piercing glare. The man insists he was only worried, but Everest thinks of his true identity as Crown Prince Fios before unexpectedly asking him to look after Liddy. Liddy looks at Everest, confused and questioning his strange request. Everest internally reflects that asking someone to look after a lady is a proposal, pondering who Liddy's partner should be. A vision of Liddy standing with Prince Phaeos flashes through his mind. Everest resolves that his sole purpose is to pray for her happiness and destroy anyone who would dare to harm her. The scene shifts to a moonlit forest, where a silver-haired man reports the name Phaeos to Everiste, who responds with his own title. The silver-haired man confirms that, as ordered, the review board found in favor of Viscount Xanathar, leaving Phaeos to wonder how the fraudulent settlement was approved. Everest calmly thanks his informant for the update. The man dismisses his thanks, then asks Everiste if his actions have, by chance, incurred his displeasure. Everest lowers his gaze, silently processing the man's question and the troubling news.